So yeah, I must be getting better known because this is the first time I've ever had a stage and a headset. Real loud. I'll try not to talk too loud. I'm a loud talker. Oh, clicky. Okay. So as he mentioned, I ended up developing this bird study. It's not really in the scope of my job, other than I don't like to see things go to waste. So I convinced my boss to go ahead and let me start this. And he said, whatever you do, don't let it interfere with your regular work. We don't talk about how much it interferes with my other work. In my first year, I did probably 100 hours of volunteer time at my own campus, just going there and obsessively walking and looking for birds. So that's where I'm going right after this. This is peak migration weekend, so there are unfortunately birds waiting for me. Okay, so this is a barred owl that hit one of our windows. You can see it was a really hard hit. The liquid from its eyes are there. It also scared the poop out of itself. We did not find this owl afterwards, and we did not find one on campus afterwards somewhere else. So hopefully he didn't damage his eyes or his body and was able to continue on. But yesterday, while I was taking photos for this presentation, I found another one, not quite as impressive, but I knew exactly what it was when I saw it. So that is still happening. Who woke up and checked Birdcast this morning? No? All right. So we had very high migration last night. That yellow line is the sunset. So this is what, 5 a.m. And I look at this every morning to see how many birds, as you watch the sunset come across, the birds will disappear. That's because they're landing here. And I look to see how many birds have landed in Kansas City area because that can determine how many birds I'm going to get on the campus that day that have hit windows. This is really interesting stuff to watch. It's live. You can watch the birds move across. It's like they catch them on radar. So, okay. So the study started, I started my position in 2015. I'm actually a graduate of UMKC. And it started because I parked on one side of the campus for almost 8 or 9 months. And then I decided to park closer to my office and come in from a different direction. And when I did, I started finding birds, dead birds, right outside the door to the building as I was going in. They only happened at a certain time of the year. I didn't understand that part. And they were happening a lot in that area. So I put the window connection together pretty quickly, but I had no idea why sometimes birds were hitting the windows. So I had a lot to learn. But those are my hands holding birds that I found there. Sometimes it was multiple birds together, so different species traveling together, or little couples would hit the windows and die on that back dock area. And I'm going to show that to you later in the presentation. And so in 2017, I started a crowdsourced study. So I used our internal communication board and I asked people, if you see a dead bird, get a hold of me and let me know, right? I'll come take pictures of it, I'll record it, that kind of thing. People were very much on board with that. I got the historical ticket requests for like picking up dead birds back to 2012 if they had the word bird in it. And then the best thing and weirdest thing that happened was that people would send me emails and they would say, 2 years ago, there was this little yellow bird. It's always a little yellow bird. And I saw it in this location and it made me so sad. And sometimes they had pictures of it from years ago that they would send me. And so I knew at that point that like it affected people and people cared. And so I probably wouldn't have too hard of a time pushing the issue on campus. So I used this to propose to my boss that we needed a formal study, and we began that in 2018. So we started with paths around buildings, and that first year we walked probably every 24 hours, and then we had people that would check bad locations at different times of the day. So I wanted to get like the most data for my baseline as I possibly could. We also put in posters that said, if you see a dead bird here, text this number. The SMS texting line has been really useful and popular, so I get a lot of reports that way. And then also I made myself a new email address. I talked to, all of the regular staff that works outdoors. The interesting thing about grounds is I asked them, how many dead birds do you find in a year? And they're like, everyone answered 2. 2, we see a couple. Then they told me stories about how a dozen cedar waxwings hit one of the bridges and died, or a red-tailed hawk hit the stairwell and died, but they swear they were only finding 2 all year. So we went around and we put stickers in the bottom of the windows so that when a bird landed in front of that window column, we could record it the same way every time. And that helps me find the patterns and stuff once I get it into my database. And then we put these posters up and put the description of where the poster was so that if someone texted me, they could say, this is where I am, and I knew where that was. And then we did a photo data sequence. We actually stole this from Duke University. They had done a bird study earlier. So we're taking lateral, dorsal, ventral photos for identification. That little line on the bottom of the bag is actually a ruler. So you can see how many inches the bird is. And then in this case, that bird actually left feathers on the window. So it was very easy to see where it had hit. And here you can see we've already treated this glass and they corrected upwards. So I had some unintended issues I needed to deal with later. And then our context photos. So we dropped these orange soccer cones down, take a photo from far back so that when Krystal's sitting in her office, she can see, what the scene looked like, where the windows are, the different floors, that kind of thing. And so here's some more context photos. One of the good things about our campus is we have a lot of floors that bump out. So it's easy to see that that bird and that bird hit the second floor because birds land approximately 1 to 3 feet from the window. Sometimes it's further, sometimes they ricochet, but generally that's the distance. And there, it hit the bridge, and here I can see it hit that window and not that window. We record everything on iNaturalist. If you don't have this app, I recommend it. It's really cool. You don't have to put dead birds on there. You can put all kinds of things you don't know what it is on there, and people will come in and tell you what it is, which is why we started using it, because I probably couldn't identify more than 5 birds, robins, sparrows, that kind of thing. When I started the study, now I'm really good at it, unless the yellow birds still get me sometimes. And some of the sparrows, I can't tell them apart very well, but most of them I can figure out. So you can see we've had 100 species come in and hit windows on our campus. That's a lot. You don't see 100 species when you're out and about during, all year long. So I'm always surprised what we get on campus. Some of the weirder ones, we've had a belted kingfisher. He did survive. A woodcock also did survive, and a bobwhite quail, and that one did not. We've had a few hawks hit, a couple of Cooper's hawks, probably chasing birds. A broad-shouldered hawk, I think, or a red-shouldered hawk, something to do with the shoulder. That bird survived. And then what else? Oh, we had a red tail hit a window. It did survive and flew off, we hope, but he lost his lunch. He was carrying a squirrel and he dropped it. So I had to get rid of a squirrel. We send all of the carcasses to KU, and those are my interns. We're taking a tour of their bird collection. About 1/3 of the birds on that tray right there are actually from our campus, and they have little tags on them. So it's kind of fun to see, like, the carcasses are actually getting used. They're not just going to waste anymore. And then, of course, they have an amazing collection of a lot of the birds that are gone from the planet. And then we also find lots of injured birds. The earlier that you walk in the morning, the more likely you are to find injured birds. If they have a little time, they will recover to the point where they can fly off. However, a lot of those birds will still pass within the next 36 hours, they estimate, due to brain swelling, broken wings, broken beaks. They drive their beaks back into their brain. They damage their eyes. They break legs. It's rough. So that little tanager right there, he came in last Wednesday. I was at an awards ceremony at the college to accept an award. Someone texted that there was a bird right around the corner. I ran out there. I'm like, I'll be right back. Anyway, I picked him up and all of a sudden he popped to life, scared me to death. And now I'm like, okay, I can't take this bird back to lunch. So wasn't sure what I was going to do with a dead bird at lunch either, but I was going to figure that out. I had to walk all the way across campus, put the bird in a box, walk back to the award ceremony, missed my own award. They did announce that I was out getting a bird, and the president of the college said that seems on brand. So if you ever have a bird that hits a window, our rule is if you can pick up a bird, it's injured, right? And we don't get them all. Sometimes they'll fly off when you're trying to grab them. So we get about half of the birds, and we take them all to rehabilitation. There's the belted kingfisher. He did survive. So in Kansas, that's Operation Wildlife. In Missouri, it's Lakeside Nature Center and Wild Souls. So it's divided by state. You can't take a Kansas bird to a Missouri rehab because of the way they're funded. And you can't take a Missouri bird to a Kansas rehab. Yes, and so the alternative, if there's absolutely no way to take a bird in, is to box the bird until it begins to recover and let it go. So these are some of the issues that we found. We have, this is a design element, sticking clear glass up into the air. So we have clear glass that birds can just see through. And then we have reflections of trees and vegetation in the glass. We have a lot of buildings that come to a V shape at the end. And then we have these glass bridges that are, of course, at treetop height. So these are some of the worst locations on campus. And I'm going to go through sort of how things look at those now. And this is the results of 2018. So you can see we had 42 injured birds. We were able to catch 20 of them. 17 of those survived. That's pretty good. We estimate, based on really nothing, a feeling I have, that 30% of the birds we just miss, right? The landscaping hides them. The searcher has searcher bias and they didn't look there. They flew off. We used to have a lot of feral cats on campus. We also have coyotes and fox, raccoons, possums. They'll all eat a dead bird, and red-tailed hawks. They'll pick up a dead bird as well. We've actually watched them pick them up before we got to them. And then, of course, it's not up to me to schedule the window washing. So they just wash the windows on campus right in the middle of migration. So we will have strikes just because of that. So dirty windows are our bird's friend. And this is one of these solutions that we went with. So this is the Nerman Museum, and we have a 1/4-inch dot. It is from an etched glass vinyl decal. So it's very subtle. It looks, high end, and it's spaced at 2 by 2 inches. And so 2 by 2 inch spacing is considered hummingbird spacing. That will keep a hummingbird from going through the glass or trying to go through the glass. I have some spacing that's bigger than that. It does not work as well. My opinion is don't waste your money. Go with a 2 by 2 spacing. But you can see it's very subtle, but you can also see why this is an issue, right? I got a run of trees coming right up and it ends in a glass building. And then the other one we have is a decorative dot pattern. So this is also a dot based on a 2x2 spacing. It's just that the dots are different sizes. It's a way to like hide the remediation in plain sight, right? People don't realize that that's what it's doing. They think it's just decorating the bridge. And you can see from the inside and from the outside what it looks like. And then here is where we're at. So I guess I can look on here. 2018, that's the blue line. And you can see how far we spiked with bird deaths in those months. So May is like a faucet of birds. It just turns on and then it turns off, right? And then fall is like a slow drip. So we got August, September, October, November, birds coming through the whole time. I prefer that because right now I'm running around all over the place taking care of birds. But so you can see our spikes there in 2018. So we did our first phase of remediation there in 2019 in the spring, and we had a big drop of springtime birds. We had a big drop of fall birds too. But when we did in 2020 in November, which would be after all of the migrations pretty much happened, we did a second round of remediation. So by 2021, we'd reduced those collisions again. As I was doing this data for this presentation, because I had not updated 2022 and 2023, I'm realizing we had a large drop of birds, about 30 birds in those 2 years from 2021. And we did nothing on campus to change that. So I'm not sure exactly what is happening there. It could be that migration patterns have changed and not as many birds came through. It could be the remediation's working a different way. It could be species. The very first year, Swainson thrushes, I mean, I'd never seen one before in my life, and we picked up like 45 of them. The next few years after the windows were treated, we had like 6. Great. I'm like, I'm a genius, right? Now, right now we have 14. So apparently I don't have as much control as I'd like. So Swainson thrushes are coming through very heavy in this area this year, and they're very prone to being killed by windows. And so I don't know, I may find out that I've done nothing for them at all. But other species, we've had a great effect on it, and we've had almost 0 of some of the other species. And 2020, of course, 2 things happened. Nobody was on campus, right? And there's been studies that show that birds did come in and were more active in places where people were no longer. But also, my interns were only allowed to do outside work. And so what's the outside work that we have the most of? Walking for birds. So we searched a little harder and we had a little more birds coming in. So we had a little bit of a spike in 2020. 2023 is also a little bit higher than 2022, not a whole lot. Like I said, migration changes every year. So we'll see what this year comes in. I'm a little freaked out. We already have like 25 birds. But I think I'm always freaked out at this point in May, and I don't remember what it was like before. So robins and doves. You might have noticed that I took them out of the general study. This is why. They are random. We call them random robins. I won't tell you what we call the doves. They don't follow patterns like the migrating birds do. And so about 14% of the time they hit the same place, and the rest of the time they're all over. And so that chart, if you mix it with my other data, makes a mess of it, and it's very hard to tell what the patterns are. So I have separated them out. However, we have helped them. Their numbers are down by 50% as well. Okay, so now here's our nitty-gritty spots on campus. You can see here, we treated those 4 windows with 4x4 space dots. But the one that correlates to the tree, that's directly in front of the tree, that's the one that gets the most strikes, right? So that reflection is really bad there. And then there's part of a reflection in the rest of the windows. And then over here, no trees. We didn't get any strikes there. So that's when I started to think, okay, this is how this is happening, right? The trees are kind of the key. And then this is the place where I started going into my office, the OCB dock. The door is right there where it says glass man door. And so in 2018, you can see most of the strikes were just on that end. And I thought, oh, I'll be clever and I'll just treat that end. I was trying to stretch the budget to as many locations as possible. So I did that. And then the next year I saved no birds because they just saw that and turned and hit that end. So those are some of the unintended consequences that I didn't realize were going to happen. So when we did the second remediation, we did do the entire bridge or the entire dock. And now we have had one strike, and we had one on the man door. That's that green one. And then we've had one strike since, and that was last year. So that's a huge improvement over what we had going, but it was a hard lesson to learn. This is another location. Most of the birds are hitting this bottom floor. And then here we can't tell where they're hitting, so we just treated the whole thing. But once I treated that, they started going upwards and hitting that third floor window. And in particular, those two, because those two have the tree reflecting in it. And so it doesn't matter that the whole thing is surrounded by brick and there's this much tree reflection, the birds will still fly into it. So that is, we came back and we treated that whole third floor. Now we did have a strike this year now on one of those second floor windows, but they're very few and far between. But again, unintended consequences that I didn't realize what was going to happen. And here's one of the bridges. So the material's a certain width. I thought I'll be clever and I'll hit the middle, leave 12 inches at the top and 12 inches at the bottom. Well, 12 inches at the top, if your trees are tall enough, that's a killer. The 12 inches at the bottom doesn't seem to matter. So I had to come in, do the other side of the bridge, fill in the top. Now we've had no strikes there. If we cut those trees down, plant new trees, and the trees are shorter at some point, I may have a problem with the bottom, but long live the trees. And then here's that bridge I was talking about where the bird hit up above. So it seems like for the most part, it's not always the truth, but if the birds are correcting because of the dots, they tend to correct upwards. And so I have changed my philosophy and now I put the dots all the way at the top and I've left as much as 2 feet at the bottom. And so far that works. They don't hit the bottom. But now we've cut down a bunch of ash trees and we planted new trees that will be short and will reflect in the bottom. And so we'll see what happens then. And then that top bridge, I was doing a little experimenting. So I only treated one side of each of these bridges because they're see-through. And I thought, can the birds see those dots from the far side and not hit the glass on that side? And the answer is yes, to some degree. So it didn't work very well on that one because at some point of the day, the sun hits it and just completely puts a glare of the sky on it. And then we get strikes. That one works better because it's more shaded and we don't get that glare. So that one I did fix. This one is still standing other than I put dots on those upper windows. And then here's that piece of glass that is up in the sky. We didn't actually know where birds were hitting this, but I had witnessed a bird hit the top section. And I drove up to the top of the parking garage and I stood on the edge of the bed of my pickup and I looked on the roof and there's dead birds on the roof. So I knew that piece, they were hitting it from both sides. So I decided just to treat that and see what would happen. We have pretty much stopped the birds from hitting that. They do still fly from the inside of the garage and hit the inside of the stairwell once in a while. So unfortunately this year we've had a Swainson's thrush hit the front and a female grosbeak hit the inside. And it's so weird, I can't remember my birthday, but I can tell you everywhere a bird is ever hit on that campus. And then this is a big bird trap. So it's a giant stairwell. The birds would fly through this opening there. I convinced marketing to put a banner in there, and that has worked great for hummingbirds. When hummingbirds would get into that space, they'd go all the way to the top and they'd just buzz themselves out, fall on that top ledge and die. Hummingbirds are really hard to get out with a net. We had a whole kit. It had like big red flowers in it and everything. We'd go up there. We'd leave little trails for them to follow out the door. But they're very hard to convince to come down and leave. So once we put the banner in, the hummingbird stopped. We still get quite a few birds stuck in there. There are dots at the very top and then on that window there, and that is because once they're inside, they will bash themselves to death between the windows trying to get to those trees. So less birds die in there, a lot of birds still get stuck in there. And they're coming in through the parking garage, and I have not been able to figure out how to get that to stop. And here again with the trees. So that's the OCB dock. That is the GEB location, and that's the COM location. Worst places on campus. Late 2019, like October, November, we redid this parking lot. We cut all those trees out so we could park more cars. And immediately we started having issues over there that we didn't have issues before. So the birds coming into campus changed their behavior because we cut down trees. I'd love to do a study on just that, but who has time? And this, you guys know about the McCormick Place incident, Chicago, this last fall? McCormick Place is a giant convention center. It sits right on the lake. And they had low cloud cover very early one morning. And all of these migrating birds came across the lake and ran into that building. There was about 1,000 birds that died. The bird strike issues that you hear about on the news are the ones where a whole bunch of birds hit at one time and they hit a tall building or a big commercial building. But a lot of the birds, most of the bird strikes actually, are at homes and at low-rise buildings. So that's my campus. Our tallest building, we have one building that's 4 stories. Everything else is 3 or below. And then residences. So if you're getting 1 or 2 bird strikes a year at your home and you think not a big deal, just know that everyone in your entire neighborhood probably has the same thing going on. And of course, buildings like, this is a low-rise building. I found a Swainson's thrush in your courtyard. So buildings like this can be an issue as well. It doesn't have to just be a glass building. It can be any building with windows. Spacing is critical if you're going to try to fix something. Like I said, the 2x2 is the best. They say if you're going to go in the vertical direction, you can do 4 inches. But you can see here, I've done 4x4 spacing, and we only got like a 68% reduction. Right now, we have almost 100% reduction at that same location because they cut that single tree down. And now they've planted 5 trees in front of those windows, but they're small. So now we're gonna have to see what happens. But the 2x2 spacing has seen 95% reduction, right? It's probably higher than that, but like, I don't wanna overestimate. And then we had some 3x3 spacing that saw an 80% reduction. That actually got pulled out during a remodel and did not get put back in. So right now I have to go and have them put dots across the whole back of a building again, because I thought maybe the new windows would be different, right? Because they reflect differently, but they're killing birds. So we're gonna have to fix them again. And then what you do to your windows can make a big difference as well. So this is our president's office. That is the conference room. That is the office. Privacy, right? But they've created a mirror on this little park. And that window is a hummingbird killer. We find so many hummingbirds there every year, and I am working on getting it fixed, but unfortunately we're on an interim president right now, so things are a little up in the air. But putting that aftermarket window tint in there or getting really dark tinted windows creates an issue. This is our library. It looked like that, and I convinced them to let me go in and scrape out all the tint when they remodeled it. And then they immediately came back and they put black shades up. So you can see what the black shade does to the reflection, right? It's fine at the bottom. It doesn't reflect anything. But at the top where the black shade is pulled, it's a mirror again. Fortunately, they leave them up most of the time. And I'm trying to get them to switch completely to a gray shade, like a light gray shade, because that helps flatten the reflections. And you can see that with those white blinds there. Where the blinds are not pulled, the reflections are very vivid, and where the white is behind the glass, the reflections are very flattened. So that is, again, the 2x2 spacing. That should technically work because the vertical is not more than 4 inches, and the same with this one. So when I started the study, there was solutions for window strikes. There are now a lot more solutions for window strikes and a lot more information out there if you decide that you need to do something. And not just at your home, but if you work somewhere that has an issue, like those types of buildings are small commercial buildings can be really bad bird killers too. Even the strip mall, I find dead birds in front of the windows. So these are all options, and some of them are much less expensive than others. So I always recommend this if money is an issue. And also you can DIY this or you can buy them. But you can get fancy, right? You can hang beads, you can do curtains, and that will help stop the reflections of the trees from hitting your windows. And then you can always get some paint markers and draw on the outside of the window during migration season, and that will help the birds see the glass and break up the reflections so that they're not running into it as well. And then when migration's over, you can just scrape it all off. And then the old-fashioned window screen, right? So my house was built in the 40s, so I have a screen on every window. I don't have a big picture window. And I call those bird trampolines because I still get a few birds off the bird feeder that hit the windows when they get scared, but they just like bounce back and fly off. So these exterior shades have become more popular lately, and those are always options if you don't want to like fit a window screen. And then the best worst case scenario would be if you're in some place where you have no control over the windows or you're way up high, putting light colored, bright colored patterns behind the glass can help break up the reflections and reflect to the birds that this is not a place to come and fly through. And then these are commercial. My first degree is in graphic design, so I'm always like, it doesn't have to be bird dots, right? You can do marketing. You can market yourself. If you're trying to convince somebody at work that they should treat the windows, they can do this. Or they can do cut vinyl and it can be decorative or advertising. Translucent graphics can be very pretty, especially if it's lit up at night. And then perforated metal screens, it's a little bit on the higher end, but they're really nice and they're popular right now. And then louvers. So one of the other things we're starting to look at on our campus as well, because now, of course, nothing ever stops with birds, you got to keep going. We have a light pollution problem, and it is, there are studies that are starting to show that when those birds are flying in the morning, they are attracted to bright lights, then they will land in a place where there's a lot going on, like our campus, right? A lot of buildings, a lot of glass, and maybe they wouldn't land there normally. They would land somewhere more wooded or somewhere more rural, but because of those lights, they get attracted and land in our campus. So maybe we're attracting more birds that would normally be there. I was at a performance at the college, and when I came back to my car, there were robins foraging. It's 9 p.m. at night in the light pollution from our parking garage. So I am in the process of getting someone with a drone to do a very late night flyover and just see where the light pollution is still blowing up into the air. But we have all of these uncapped lights across campus. So yeah, it's a big problem. And our astronomy department doesn't care for it either because they can't see with the telescope when it's all lit up. And so light pollution is important, and that's an easy fix too. Motion detectors, timers, warm lights, and close your shades at night during migration so you're putting less light out into the atmosphere. If you needed to report a bird, if you're like somewhere in Kansas City or whatever, BirdSafe KC is a study that's going on downtown, and they would love to have your report if you see a bird, upload a photo, address of the building, that type of thing. All right, so that's pretty much what I have. I guess we're going to do some questions.
I think my microphone's on. Yes, thank you so much.
You bet.
And we do have time for some questions.
Thank you.
I was checking my phone. We have a live stream audience watching online. So we want to get the audio of your questions for them. So I'll come around with the microphone. Yes, we'll start here. And also our online viewers, if you have a question, just type it in the Q&A chat box there on Zoom, and my colleague Christina will send that to me.
Have you found plants or any indoor decorations disproportionately attract bird strikes?
Yes. There is one location on campus where the first year we did the study, they had planted a bunch of red flowers and they reflected in a window that's probably 15 feet away. And we got hummingbird after hummingbird on that glass. And since then, they have not planted anything red, and we've never had another strike on that window.
All right, we have a question from an online viewer who was impressed with the dots on the windows and asked, did you put those up yourself or did you hire someone to do those?
Well,
Said it looked very professionally done.
they were professionally done. While I have the ability to put them up because I used to own a sign company, the college will not allow me on a lift. So we did hire a sign company to make the dots and then put them up. So ours are custom made, but there are now on the market, there are ones that look almost identical to that you can buy in it's an optically clear roll with the dots printed on it. And we're actually about to put some of those up in a location and try them out.
I know we have a lot of windows here that'll probably have to be professionally done as well. So a sign company, there are plenty of those in town, I know.
Yes.
Any other questions? Anybody?
Over there.
Oh, projector was in my way.
I was wondering what, I know that it says only use light when you need it. Is there a particular time of day? Because I know some people will have lights on in their neighborhoods for various reasons. So is there a particular time of day that you recommend always having lights off in outside situations during migration?
Yeah, so there's a lot more information if you go to like Lights Out Heartland, or if you Google anywhere, this has become a big issue as well. But sort of in that like late morning, or I guess really early morning to late morning when the birds are coming down is sort of the issue that I'm looking at dealing with. Because I think there are birds landing on our campus that wouldn't normally because of the lights and the way that the lights blow up into the air. They've told me that they turn those lights off at 11 o'clock at night. And so when the drone is doing the flyover and stuff, we're going to find out if that's true. But they come back on at like 5 a.m. So.
All right, Krystal, we have a question in the back of the room here.
Is this electromagnetic storm that we're having now affecting the bird migrations? I know it's a little off of this, but is it affecting them at all?
I mean, looking at that live broadcast, that looks very typical for this time of year. But I'm not, I don't know actually if that would have any large effect on migration. They're generally following, the sun and the moon, and they all are flying in the same general direction right now. I don't know if that messes with it. Guess we'll find out, won't we?
Right, any other questions? No, all right, thank you so much, Krystal, for a
You bet.
wonderful talk.
Thanks.
And thank you for attending today's program. Oh, the light's on. Thank you for attending today's program. Stick around if you'd like to look through the exhibition. And we also have a STEM program going on, Eat Like a Bird, for students ages 5 to 13. That's going on out front if you want to stop by that too and check out what's going on there. So thank you again and have a great rest of your weekend.